Hello book friends, I'm Addie and you are now watching Books and Tea Time, and it's been a while, hasn't it? I know. I haven't filmed in forever. I am like in a reading slump, but it's like the weirdest thing ever because like I want to be reading, but like life is just buzzing around my head like little bees distracting me, and I'm in the middle of like 6 books and I just keep bouncing between all of them. I'm like, what am I in the mood to read? What do I want to do? What do I want to read? I don't know, it's a mess. But we're here today to do my winter wrap-up, so none of that matters. It's wrap-up time because spring is here, almost. I'm trying very hard to channel and manifest spring energy with my appearance today, but it's still pretty cold outside. Some days it snows and other days it's like 55 degrees. I don't know what's happening. The weather doesn't know what's happening. So I'm here today to present to you my winter wrap-up, because on this channel I do seasonal wrap-ups instead of monthly wrap-ups because my monthly reading fluctuates so dramatically. Sometimes I read like 10 books, sometimes I read 2. And as per a subscriber request, we are going to be organizing today based on star rating. So we're going to go in like increasing ascending order. We're going to start with like the low tier stuff and then make our way upward, onward, and upward. Also, just a little update. I showed this to you guys in my last wrap-up that I started doing a reading journal, and because I was pretty good about it, I upgraded because Alexander, my partner, his mom, gifted me a reading journal, this really fancy and cute reading journal, and I decorated it. Here's the front page. So cute. Love it so much. So half of my reviews are in this notebook and half of them are in this one. So we're going to be bouncing between, but from now on I will be using this one. Let's talk stats really quickly. So I read 22 books in the winter months from like mid to late December to the middle/end of March pretty much. And I DNF'd 1 book, so we'll briefly talk about that in a second. I physically owned 2 of the books that I read. I know, it's bad. We're just gonna continue. I read 4 physical library books, 10 ebooks, 3 audiobooks, and there were 4 books where I physically read and did an audio combination. So like I listened to it while I was reading it, like at the same time. I read 6,812 pages, not including the book I DNF'd. The longest book I read was A Court of Mist and Fury at 626 pages, and the shortest book I read was Wrapped Up in You, which is 127 pages. It was a holiday novella. So let's just jump right in to the reviews. Very briefly, before we dive into the new books that I read, I reread 3 books and I DNF'd 1 book. So let's just very briefly talk about my rereads, okay? So I bought myself copies of my favorite romances that I listened to on audio last year for Christmas. So I reread Red, White, and Royal Blue, and I annotated this to high heaven. This was such a great rereading experience. I want to show you guys in the very beginning my key. I have an entire color dedicated to reasons why Henry and I would be best friends in real life if he was real. Obviously it's a 5 out of 5. It was the first time and it was the second time. I can't recommend this book enough. I'll link the video where I reviewed this for the very first time. I gush about it for like 15 minutes, but yeah, this was a reread. Then I reread the first 2 books in the Bergman Brothers series because book 5 comes out in May. And I cannot wait. I can't wait for it to come out. I am so over the moon. That's like my most anticipated book of the year. Hands down, I would sell my soul for an arc of that book. I really would. Only When It's Us is book 1. Always Only You is book 2. These are sports romances by Chloe Leese. I'm going to talk about these more very soon in another video, so I'm not going to say anything right now other than I reread them and annotated them and gave them both 5 out of 5 stars. So I DNF'd Shipped by Angie Hockman at 50% because it was just not not what everyone was like hyping it up to be. It's just, it was not what I wanted. Everybody was like, it's the hating game meets the unhoneymooners and it's so good, but I really disliked the main character, Henley. I just like, she would constantly contradict herself and just make her seem like a bad person, and I really like, she wasn't growing, and like I wasn't interested in the plot. And if I'm remembering correctly, it's single POV, which is just like not my thing when it comes to romance. It's very hard for single POV romances to like really reach to me and like touch my heart, but it's not impossible. Red, White, and Royal Blue is single POV, so it's not impossible. It's trying to be the hating game at sea, and it's not. It's a boring knockoff, is word for word what I wrote in this notebook. Let's start with my 3-star books. We have 4 of them to talk about. The first one is Wrapped Up in You. As I mentioned, this was the shortest one that I read. It was also a holiday novella by Talia Hibbert. It was a really nice holiday novella, but for me, my problem with novellas usually is that it's very hard for me to connect with characters in such a short amount of time, and character work and character development is really important to me, especially in a romance. I thrive off of like really fun plot and really deep connection and like emotional and, you know, just like personality connections between characters, and we just didn't get a lot of time with either of the characters. Talia Hibbert's writing is always really good because it's Talia Hibbert. She's the author of the Brown Sisters trilogy, and I absolutely adore the Brown Sisters trilogy, and I liked this. It's just, it's not nearly as spicy. There's just not a lot of like smutty scenes, to be honest. I have a reading vlog actually where I read 3 holiday romances, so I'm not going to spend too much time talking about these romances, but if you want to watch that video, I'll have a link to it. So yeah, 3 stars, pretty good. If you're feeling the holiday spirit, check it out. That's really all I'll say about that one. Then I briefly read I Hate Running and You Can Too by Somebody by Brendan Leonard. I read this book because I thought that I was going to take up running as a hobby, which, spoiler alert, I did not. But I did like the message behind some of the stuff in this book, which is basically like, you don't have to always be enjoying yourself and be fully in it and dedicated when you're doing any kind of workout, especially running. Like, you can hate it during portions of actually doing the thing, and you can hate it when thinking about doing the thing, but you can also not let it deter you and make you not do the thing. That being said, I have not ran since I read this book, so it was obviously not that motivational, but I have my own issues with that. The next book that I have to talk about is Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Seanan McGuire. This is the second book in the Wayward Children's series. So I don't know. I don't think I'm going to continue with this series. I just don't think it's for me. I've seen a lot of people really like love and like adore this series on YouTube, and I don't know if it's my shtick, right? Because I read the first book, Every Heart a Doorway. I think I gave the first book like 2.75 stars, and I'm giving this one a 3 star. So it's like, honestly, like, they're just not my jam. I liked this one better. Down Among the Sticks and Bones was good because I love Jack. She's like one of my favorite characters, and like, if this was a series just about Jack, I would read it. Or even if it was a series just about Jack and Jill, I would read it. Even within this book, it was just like, it was kind of like One Trick Pony, you know what I mean? Like, these girls were raised a certain way, and then they got into their special worlds, and it fit them perfectly, and like, you kind of knew what was going to happen because of what happens in the first book. And yeah, I liked the world, which I think is just called the Moors, and like, there's Frankenstein vibes and there's Dracula vibes in this world of the Moors. It's just very much like Regency bordering on early Victorian era England. Think like Wuthering Heights, think Frankenstein, and then like Dracula, which is like way at the end of the 19th century, but that's neither here nor there. You get the vibe. It's gothic, and I liked that about it. I liked Jack's storyline. I even liked Jill's storyline a little bit, but ultimately it was just meh, and I feel bad to say that, but yeah, I think a lot of people really like this, so I'm not telling you not to give it a try. I definitely think that it would be popular with a lot of people. This is also very much like plot over character development, in my opinion. Jill's character especially feels very like surface level to me, and Jack, we kind of get a little bit of deep dive into her a little bit more. I wanted more of the Dracula and Frankenstein vibes. The Sapphic love story was really cute, but again, I wanted more. We get like one scene, maybe 2 scenes. So yeah, if you like plot over characters, if you like fast-paced, really short, grab your attention kind of stories, if you like urban fantasy or dark fantasy, YA, if you like the multiple world, traveling between worlds thing, this series will probably intrigue you a lot. Again, folktale, Frankenstein, Dracula vibes, the gothic, anything like that. And if you like Sean McGuire's writing, just try it out, okay? I'm not going to tell you not to, but I'm also not going to continue with the series, so take that as you will. Okay, the last book I gave 3 stars was Electric Idol by Katie Robert. I also read Neon Gods, which we are going to talk about shortly, but this is the second book in the Dark Olympus series, I think it's called. It is a love story between Eros and Psyche. Eros is basically Cupid, but I think in a Roman context, or maybe he's Greek and Cupid's Roman. This book is just, the writing is not it. So you have to go into this book just saying, okay, the writing is going to be here, and the character development is going to be like right here, but like the steaminess and the drama are like up here. You know what I mean? Like, it is a smutty, steamy, dramatic mess. It's kind of like watching a like hardcore smutty soap opera, but for young hip people, that is based on Greek mythology. That's the way that I would describe this. I liked book 1 way more. I don't know if it was because I didn't like Eros and Psyche as much as I like Hades and Persephone, obviously, because book 1, Neon Gods, is a Hades and Persephone retelling. I read the ebook for Electric Idol, and I listened to the audiobook for Neon Gods, and I don't know if it was the disconnect between those 2 reading like formats, but Electric Idol was just way too repetitive. So damn repetitive. Like, literally 100 billion times they would say that
Eros is a bad boy and he has to do terrible things for his mom Aphrodite because she uses him as his, like, as her pawn, as her weapon.
I liked the steamy and smutty parts, and Eros and Psyche's relationship, but outside of their relationship, the plot was very lackluster. I was not invested in it as much as I was the first one. It just felt a little far-fetched to me, the whole, like, Aphrodite situation and what was going on. Again, dramatic soap opera, you have to suspend a lot of disbelief. I would say it's a 3 out of 5 on the spice scale. If you like dark romance, marriage of convenience, Greek mythology, and smutty books with okay writing, I would check out this series. Content warnings specifically for fat phobia and violence in Electric Idol. So those are all the books that I gave 3 stars to. I also gave 3.5 stars to 2 books. The first book I gave 3.5 stars to was Neon Gods, which is obviously the first book in the Dark Olympus series. Here's where I get confused, is because I really like this book. I gave it 3.5 stars, which, like, in theory is like not that great, but like I loved the Hades and Persephone vibes. Hades and Persephone is done so impeccably in this book. It's just like, I was so impressed with how Katie Robert tells their story but like modernizes it at the same time, and like I feel like it works really well in the first one, and then it kind of starts to like unravel a little bit in the second one. It's just like, again, it's a modernized world. It's like Olympus in the present, right? Like if there was like technology and like guns. Hades and Persephone was great. I feel like their characters are a lot more fleshed out than the characters in book 2. I love mythology, and Hades and Persephone, when it's done correctly, is like some of my favorite retellings ever. Which brings me to my most favored point about this storyline, is the way that Katie Robert brings the discussion and importance of consent to the forefront, because I think when you use the Hades and Persephone retelling that myth, you have to do something like that, right? Because there are certain versions of the Hades and Persephone myth where Persephone is taken against her will and sexually assaulted by Hades, right? And so I think it's very important, and that's something I really respect and admired about Katie Roberts' retelling here, is that she is so good about foregrounding consent and like putting Hades in the position where he is always making sure that he has Persephone's consent for whatever that they are doing, and never ever crossing that boundary. And I think that, again, is so important, specifically for a retelling of the Hades Persephone mythos, but also just, you know, in romance, right? Especially in like this darker kind of romance, is just remembering, you know, the importance of consent. The steam in this book is a 5 out of 5. This is probably, up until very recently, we are not going to get to this today because it's part of my spring wrap up, but I read another Katie Robert book that was the smuttiest book I've ever read in my life, but this is like a close second or third. This is not for the faint of heart, okay? Don't listen to it out loud. Don't listen to it on public transit. Don't listen to it on a lunch break at work. Don't listen to it unless you are alone in your house. The thing that I also appreciated about this is, like, to me, the plot was interesting. There's like some political scheming that's going on, and it's very interesting, and the way that like Hades fits into that and Persephone fits into that, and how their relationship shakes things up in the political system of Olympus and how that plays out. Like, it all made sense to me and it felt well executed. The next book that I gave 3.5 stars to was A Court of Thorns and Roses. I have an entire spoiler-filled vlog of me reading this book for the first time to investigate if it's worth the hype. And here's my thing, guys. Book 1 is fine. It's fine. It's an interesting, like, kind of Beauty and the Beast retelling, kind of like really out there situation. I liked Feyre. I liked the world. The plot was entertaining. The writing was better than I expected. Was it top notch? No. It's not super creative in terms of like how the world is built and how the history of things comes about, but it was entertaining. That is all I'm going to say about that one, because we have thoughts about book 2. Okay, let's just leave it at that. Book 1 was good, better than I expected, but not worth the hype, in my opinion. I was like, why do people love this book so much? If you like fantasy romance, Beauty and the Beast, Hunger Games, or Katniss vibes, I feel like Feyre, especially at the beginning, reminds me a lot of Katniss. If you like fairies and if you like dark fantasy, I think you'll like this book. Next, we've got the 3.75 star ranking. And the first one in this is Window Shopping. This is another of the Christmas books that I read. It's not really a novella. I think it's like a full-size novel. It's by Tessa Bailey. It was good. Again, I have all of my thoughts. I'm just gonna link that holiday romance vlog because I don't really want to repeat myself too much, especially since it's so far past the Christmas season. I feel like you guys are probably like, I don't care anymore. The holidays are so beyond over. Winter is over. I'm just gonna say I liked it. Again, I recommend it. It wasn't my favorite book ever. It was very steamy, but also very weird. Like, the dynamic and like the flirting could get very bizarre between the two main characters. Like, just to the point where like I wasn't even like uncomfortable. I was just like, no human would say that to another human being in an attempt to seduce them. Next, I read Persuasion by Jane Austen. I read this because I am buddy reading it with one of my very good friends, my BFF. We wanted to read this together, and this was actually the last Austen that I had to read before having read all of Austen's books, and I really want to do a video where I rank all of Austen's books. So again, I'm not going to dive too deep into my review of this because I'm probably going to do that in a few weeks. So if you really want to see that, like and comment down below and let me know, and I'll fast track it. But I really just want to like go through ranking the Austens, like in my opinion, from like my favorite to my least favorite, and like which ones I like, what I recommend if you want to start reading Austen, etc. So yeah, I really enjoyed Persuasion. It was fun. I definitely missed reading like classics and discussing books because I had graduated this time last year pretty much, so I'm still missing that a little bit, like the discussion piece. So my friend and I wanted to read it together so that we could discuss it together and just, you know, get that that scholarly feeling back, and I definitely did feel that. And I missed Austen's witty, sarcastic writing. Her wit is like on point in this book. Let me just say that. Like, I don't know if it had just been a while since I'd read Austen, or if this one is just like really like, it's so sassy. I love it. I love Austen's like dry, delicate wit, and like how if you're not really paying attention, or if like you're one of the characters who she like thinks is unintelligent, you just won't get it. I liked it. It's not my favorite Austen, that's all I'll say. I won't tell you where it lands on the ranking system, but it's a 3.75 stars for me. Okay, now we're getting into like the meat and potatoes, the good stuff. My 4 stars. First and foremost, we have Artificial Condition, which is the second book in the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. It's about a robot being entity who hacks its governor module in its head, and basically it goes rogue, and it like doesn't have to be, it's not controlled by like the government organization, the space government organization anymore, and instead of going on a rampage and killing humans, it decides to binge watch media and like TV shows, all that kind of like good stuff, and learn about humans like kind of indirectly that way, like how to like fake being a human. And it's a really cool, fun series. I definitely like the second book more. We're getting a lot more with like Murderbot's personality and its interaction with other humans and other like other like AI presences. The plot thickens. We're starting to learn a little bit about its past that even Murderbot didn't remember. And I like where the series is going. I'm definitely going to continue on with it. I can't remember what the third book's called. There's a really, really funny interaction in this book between Murderbot and this like ship AI called Art. And they just have like a very like witty banter going on between them, and it's just so fun to read about. Some of the scientific parts do go over my head, but it honestly doesn't really bother me because they're novellas, so they're very fast-paced and they're not like super jargon heavy. I feel like if you want to get into sci-fi but you're a little hesitant like I was, I would definitely recommend this series because it's not like super heavy and demanding in that regard. After that, I read Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly. This was the NB Book Club pick for January? No, I lied. It was the February pick. Oh my god, months are just seeping together, aren't they? In my opinion, the plot wasn't super crazy memorable, but I did really love the characters, specifically London. They're like one of my new favorite characters ever. Just like so sweet and awkward and adorable, and just I love everything about them. They're a fictional character that I wish was real so that I could be their friend. Why does this always happen to me? I would say that it's a 3 out of 5 on the spice scale. Not a lot of steamy scenes, but the ones that were there were good and well done, in my opinion. The cooking show plot was fun. It was better than I expected. I didn't even tell you what this book was about. This is a romance that takes place on a cooking show between 2 contestants that are like competing with each other. The first contestant's name is Dahlia, and she's like kind of down on her luck, just got out of a divorce, and she really needs this money, and she's like discovering her passion for cooking, and she doesn't want to be distracted by anything. And then we have London, who is the first openly non-binary contestant on the cooking show, and they are really just like trying to prove to themselves and to the like haters out there that they can take up space in this world, and when they do so they can succeed. Also, London wants to use the money if they win to open a organization for young non-binary and genderqueer and trans folks. Then the 2 collide. Dahlia was cool. I liked that she was a messy character and we were able to just root for her even as she was trying to figure out what she wanted from life and what she was gonna do. But at the same time, I wasn't crazy about like the whole like 3rd act drama that happens between her and London and how she handles the situation. It wasn't super great, and I didn't like love that part of it. I felt like it was kind of like it could have been better written, in my opinion. And I was a little uncomfy about how often Dahlia brought up her ex and would like compare him to London. I just, like, I hate that trope where, like, characters, especially in a romance, will compare their current love interest to previous love interests or, like, previous people that they've been with. I'm just like, leave the past in the past. This book is not about them. I don't care about your ex-husband. I care about you in London right now. So, like, go kiss them. Even with those caveats, I still really loved this book. I thought it was very well done. The cooking show element was fun, which I was a little worried about because I'm not a huge fan of competition arcs, but I feel like it was there just enough. It wasn't too oppressive. We got on-set scenes, but we also got a lot of off-set scenes, and it just felt like it was well balanced. Content warnings for transphobia and misgendering though. Next, my next 4-star read was A Court of Mist and Fury. This is a different series. It's a different author. It's a different vibe entirely from book 1. I don't even know what happened in book 1. By the time that I'm reading book 2, I'm like, what the hell is going on? Everything that is done in book 1 is just so unraveled by the end. I'm like, was book 1 necessary? And I literally don't know the answer to that question, because then I'm like, well, it builds up a lot and it gives you a lot of the backstory and you get to know Feyre before she gets into this real relationship. But then I'm like, you also spend a lot of time on her and Tamlin. I'm sorry, I've already dove. Here are my thoughts. They are chaotic. Please accept that. If you have not read this series, I apologize for what's about to happen. Why does the first book exist is my question. Because was it necessary? What if the first book was just a novella? Why spend all this time, the entire book, on her and Tamlin? Why spend this whole arc on how much she loves Tamlin and is willing to do all this crazy shit for him at the end of the first book? And I'm just like, why? If he's not even, like, your true love. The plot in this book was infinitely better. The pacing was stronger. We still have a lot of those more, like, telling instead of showing and world building moments, but, like, that's just, like, what it is, and I accept that. The character development was really good. Rhysand, however you say his name, good God of heaven, the light is literally shining upon me because he's a gift to this series. I loved him. Him and Feyre getting together was the best thing that could have ever in a million years happened to the series, and I was terrified because I hate love triangles. I don't like the love triangle trope. It is not my thing. It's not my jam, but the way that it is done here is excellent. It's so good. The way that Rhysand enters this whole moment and Feyre meeting his friends and the found family elements and their romance and their falling together and falling in love. It was glorious. The steam in this book, top notch. Still definitely not a 5 out of 5. I would probably give it a 3 out of 5 on the spice scale actually, but it was well done. Well done. I am nervous for book 3. I have heard some lackluster things about that one. I feel like I want to tell people just read the second book, disregard book 1, and maybe book 3 as well. Like, what? I understand books are supposed to get better as the series goes on, but to completely make the first book irrelevant? All of my ACOTAR stands out there, help me understand what is going on. I have not read book 3 yet, so maybe I should just do it. Content warnings for PTSD of sorts. It's not technically written on page, but I feel like a lot of what Feyre is going through is related to PTSD, violence, gore, and sexual assault. To my 4.5 star babes, we've got 3. I have to close this window. Good God, I'm getting a headache. First and foremost, we have Upright Women Wanted. This is the first book that I read this year, and I really liked it. It was starting off the year so strong. It's like a post-apocalyptic dystopian western where there are these people called the librarians who distribute approved materials to all of these towns, but they also secretly subvert the system by spreading like unapproved materials. First things first is, from the very first sentence, this writing will grab you by the throat and hold your breath until the end. Like, it's exceptional, vivid writing, grips you from page 1 and captures you and does not let you go until the very end of the book. It was so good. I read it in like a day and a half. I loved the Wild West vibes, but like add a queer relationship to its core with polyamorous representation and NB representation. I mean, perfection. It was so good. This like little queer librarian cult that's just subverting the system in this Wild West world. It was so, so good. But our main character, Esther, has recently she's run away from her town for kind of known but also kind of unknown reasons. They start to unravel in the first couple chapters. So I'll leave it brief by just saying that she has to leave her town and she wants to join the librarians so that she can like flee and find a new life. And at first they're like, you're a fugitive, we can't take you on. But she starts to kind of show her worth to them and bond with them, and the librarians end up taking her on, but it's a lot more than she bargained for because it's Wild West vibes. We've got shootouts, we've got traveling on horses in sandy dunes. I don't even know what I'm saying, but it was very atmospheric. The vibes were there. It was fun. It was entertaining. It was fast-paced. The writing was there. The character development was there. The found family elements were there. It was really, really well done from beginning to end. The plot was really cool. It explores a lot about learning and asking questions and learning not to trust automatically what you're told and learning to think for yourself and be yourself without asking for permission. I was very impressed with how much happens and how much is captured in such a short amount of pages because this is a novella, and my only complaint is that I wish it was a little bit longer, and that's always my complaint with novellas. I feel like I highly, highly recommend this to like everybody because it's so quick and it has so much to offer. I just think a lot of people would really enjoy this book, and I never hear anybody talking about this book. Then I read the January NB Book Club pick, which was She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. I annotated this one a lot. I read this physically and annotated it, but I also listened to the audio while I was annotating it. I just find like that is really helping me focus lately, is like having dual like media experiences of books, if that makes sense. Shelley Parker Chan's writing is masterful. So this is a Mulan retelling of sorts. It's always described as Mulan meets Song of Achilles. I kind of see that, but it's also got like a lot of its own. This is a story about destiny, about pursuing your destiny no matter what, and doing that to stay alive and to exist in this world and to find a way to embody greatness and destiny. So this is a story about our main character, Chu Chung-ba, and she basically, after her brother and her father die, she takes her brother's existence, right? Her brother dies, and so she becomes him so that she can have his destiny of greatness instead of her own destiny of nothingness. And so she goes to this monastery, becomes a monk, and lives her entire life in this book as her brother, as Chu Chung-ba. And it's just about her rise to greatness and what happens. And we also follow a couple other different characters. We follow her love interest, Ma, and we follow a general on the other side of this war, Oh Young. And all of the characters are so well written and complex. Morally, we've got some morally great characters, but also just like characters that are motivated, but not necessarily motivated by like clean cut morality and like this is right and this is wrong. It's a lot of like revenge. It's a lot of just sheer want and desire for greatness. And I really loved the way that Shelley Parker Chan presents that as, you know, admirable, but also like something that like, you know, is complicated. I loved Oh Young so much, and I hope we get to see more of him in the next book. Oh my god. This is just like such a wild ride. The politics, this is like heavy in politics and like war and like battle strategy, war strategy and decisions. I was just constantly surprised and caught off guard in the best way. Like there were so many twists and turns in this plot. I wanted more about the ghosts. I don't want to spoil too much, but essentially there is like this ability to see ghosts and see into like this spiritual realm almost, and it's a little too vague. I want more of that, and I'm hoping that maybe we'll get more of that as the series continues, because that's something that I'm really intrigued by, that I felt was kind of just like sprinkled in there. Then the last book that I gave 4.5 stars to was No Gods, No Monsters by Cadwell Turnbull. I read the ebook for this for Blackathon, and I have a lot of thoughts that I shared in my Blackathon vlog, so I'll have a link to that up here. It's non-spoilery, so I'm just going to direct you all there to that video for my thoughts on this, but I will say that I loved the book. Obviously, I gave it 4.5 stars. It's kind of, you get a bunch of different stories that are on different timelines, but that connect to each other, and they slowly weave together like 3 different storylines and a couple different timelines, and there's a lot of like multiverse kind of stuff going on, and like monsters and like witches, werewolves, all these different beings. It's so well done. But essentially the whole plot of this book is that monsters start to make themselves known to the public eye after kind of being hidden among the masses for thousands of years, and it's about the fallout from that, and like also about that like as it's happening in the present. And again, so you follow a lot of different characters. It's really weird and confusing, but in the best way. It's nuanced. I love the discussions of monsters and where that intersects with marginalized identities specifically. The representation was exceptional. We have non-binary characters, an ace character, a representation of an open relationship, some sapphic relationships, and the communalism, like co-op stuff that's like kind of an undercurrent of the plot was awesome. Really cool to read about, very intriguing. If you like sci-fi fantasy hybrids and multiverse writing kind of stuff, monsters, witches, and superhuman beings, social commentary in your fantasy, because this has got some great social commentary and like allegorical kind of things going on, multi-POV time and place jumps, as well as some mild horror and violence. Content warnings for gun violence, death, suicide, addiction, drug use and abuse, death of a parent, self-harm, gore, and police brutality. I know it's a lot, but this book was really good. Can't recommend it enough. Cadwell Turnbull is an awesome writer. So last but not least, it is time to talk about my 5-star reads of the winter months. Okay, so coincidentally, we have 5 of them. So the first one is The Mistletoe Motive by Chloe Leese. She is the author of the Bergman Brothers books that I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, and she wrote a holiday novella, and so I listened to the audiobook for that. It was amazing. I loved it. Again, I talked about it in my holiday romance reading vlog, so I'll have a link to that video if you want to go back and like hear my specific thoughts. But I loved it. I thought it was so well done. For a novella, it was really good. If you like the Hating Game, this has a lot of Hating Game vibes, because it is an enemies to lovers romance about these 2 people who work at a bookstore, and they have basically been like direct messaging each other without knowing. So it's kind of like a You've Got Mail meets the Hating Game situation, and it's about their love story. We have a demisexual and an autistic main character, and I believe that the male love interest has diabetes, but because it's only from her perspective, we don't get a whole lot of his internal thoughts on that, but it is mentioned in the story. So again, you get a little bit of that representation. So yeah, it was perfect in every single way. It was exactly what I wanted as a holiday romance. I listened to it in one day while I was decorating my house for Christmas. It was perfection. I loved it so much, and that is that. After that, I read Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. Okay, listen, this was the first book that I gave 5 stars to this year, and it was so good. I'm so glad that I picked it up. New favorite, definitely contender for one of my top books of the year. So this book is about a woman who is a biologist. I think she's a biologist, but basically she is going on this trip to Scotland, to the like rural areas of Scotland, to reintroduce wolves into the natural habitat, because it is going to help the environment bounce back, and it's just really good for the environment. But obviously the locals are not crazy about them introducing wolves into their backyards. Essentially, it's gonna, like, you know, they're afraid. And so she's got a lot of like tension with that, but there's also some mystery going on because her sister has come with her, but her sister won't speak anymore, and there's like some allusions to dark stuff that happened to her and her sister in the past. And so there's like a mystery element with that, as well as like a mystery element where someone dies, and the town assumes that it's one of the wolves, and this woman decides that she's gonna solve what happens and prove that it wasn't one of the wolves to protect them and protect this like environmental movement that she and her colleagues are pushing, right? The environmentalism component and learning about wolves and conservation and rewilding efforts, and also sustainable living, was so cool. I loved that. And one of the things that was super cool that I always forget about when I'm like talking about this book, but our main character Inti has mirror touch synesthesia. I think I'm saying that right, where basically if she sees something happen to another person, she feels it as though it's happening to her. So if she sees someone else get slapped on the face, she'll feel like she's being slapped in the face. Like actually feel it and like feel that pain, and like her body will react as though that actually just happened to her. That was so fascinating to read about. I personally liked that the plot in this book is realistic. Like there are twists and turns and like plot twists that make you think certain things, and like you don't really know what's gonna happen, and like there's a lot of like, you know, red herrings going on. But ultimately I like a thriller that is plausible, because I feel like honestly like you can get thrillers that are really well done and like have that shock value, but not ones that are so out there and like unrealistic. Like I cannot get on board with that, and like this book absolutely was not that. It was the perfect length. It was really vivid. The writing is visceral. Like literally the first line in this book is exceptional. If you like environmentalism and wolves, fast-paced storytelling, great and vivid writing, sisterhood and motherhood, and Scotland/small town vibes. Content warnings for domestic abuse, animal death, sexual assault, and murder. Okay, we've got a couple more here to go. Next, I read Volume 1 of Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe. I adored this. This is a Hades and Persephone graphic novel retelling. This is honestly very similar to Neon Gods, but like less smutty. Like this is like more friendly for like a YA audience, I would say, or like a new adult audience, whereas like Katie Robert is like X-rated. This is like PG-13. You know what I mean? It's also so stinking cute. The art style is actually adorable. Like literally look at this. How was that not the cutest thing you've ever laid your eyes on? I loved it. I love how Hades and Persephone were characterized and their interactions, the art style, everything about it. I can't wait for volume 2 to come out. What? I can't. It's so good. Okay, moving on, we have 2 more to talk about, and they are my last 2 reads for Blackathon. Again, I'm going to link my Blackathon vlogs, and I talk about both of these books in those reading vlogs respectively. But first and foremost, we have Pet by Akweke Emezi. 5 out of 5 stars. Am I surprised? No. I knew this is my first Akweke Emezi, and I knew that I was gonna love their writing because I've heard nothing but endless praise from everybody who I've ever heard of that has read Akweke Emezi. So I knew that I was gonna like Emezi, but dang was this book good. So Pet is a middle grade like YA story about a young transgender girl and her utopian town, let's say. It's a utopian world, post-revolution world where monsters don't exist anymore, but this creature comes to life from this painting that Jam, our main character, her mother paints, and this creature comes to life and tells her that there's a monster hiding in her town in her best friend's house, and she is the only one who will listen to Pet, this creature, and so she and Pet go on a mission to find this monster and protect her best friend Redemption from this hidden monster. This utopian society, post-revolution world is very thought-provoking, and the way that Emezi writes it and subverts like this like everything's perfect now idea is that, you know, monsters can still be hiding among us, and we have to be prepared to address that. That discussion of monsters and visibility versus invisibility and monsters and monstrous behavior. Loved the relationship, the friendship between Jam and Redemption. It was so precious, so heartwarming. Even when they were put at odds with each other, they still were just always on each other's side, if that makes sense. Like, they were still on each other's team even when they weren't seeing eye to eye, and that was just such a beautiful moment for their friendship. I loved that so much. I loved Jam as a main character, her loyalty, her bravery. I also love the information we get about her dissociating and her relationship to language. Specifically, she does not prefer to vocalize a lot, so she'll learn sign language or like write to people. She and Pet communicate telepathically, and she chooses very sparingly in certain moments to vocalize. That was really cool. And also we get these little tidbits about her transitioning as a young child and, you know, what that's like for her and the reality of, you know, hormone implants and how the weather affects it. It was just like these really cool little tidbits that I never would have thought of. That it's really cool to read about. I also really appreciated, especially since this is a middle grade novel, that the abuse happens off page. Even though it's mentioned and even though we know that there is a monster doing monstrous things, the abuse happens off page. I can't wait to read more from Emezi. I'm definitely going to. I have Freshwater in my physical owned collection of books, and I definitely am going to be reading Bitter, which is the prequel to Pet. And last but certainly not least, the very last book that I read and that my entire second Blockathon vlog was dedicated to is Escaping Exodus by Nikki Drayden. One of the most unique sci-fi books I have read in ages. And like, I don't read a lot of sci-fi, but like, it's also just one of the most unique premises for a book that I've read in ages. Basically, we have this sci-fi universe, this sci-fi world where people live inside of these massive spacefaring creatures, and their entire civilization and everything is built around the fact that they excavate the corpses of these beings and turn them into places where they can temporarily live. It's dual POV, it's so fast-paced and interesting, definitely a page-turner, lots of political intrigue, interesting family structures and a matriarchal culture that was super cool. We got polygamous, polyamorous relationship representation. The last third of this book is very rushed, but in my opinion, I think it actually helps to reinforce a lot of the themes of like the lack of control that the human beings have in their world, and like how Seska, our main character, comes to understand that lack of control and like what she's gonna do about that as a matriarch, as the person who is in line for the throne. And so I think that kind of reinforces it, but I could definitely understand how some people will be frustrated by the fact that like literally so much happens in like 100 pages. I am excited to continue the series. I definitely recommend it if you like sci-fi, if you're newer to sci-fi. I think this is like really cool and imaginative and unique without being like super heavy science jargon intimidating, if that makes sense. If you like sapphic and forbidden love romances, matriarchal structures and social commentary, space odyssey kind of stuff, and lots of mini plot twists. There are so many cool plot twists and turns in this story. And that is that. I hope that you liked this video. I hope that it made sense. And do we like the star rating review system? Do we like when I do it by genre, which is how I did the fall one? Do we like just when I do it in chronological order of how I read the books? What do you guys prefer? What are your thoughts moving forward? Thank you so much for watching this video. It means the world to me. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if that's your jam, and I hope to see you in my next video. Happy reading, happy writing, and happy living. Peace out.